Elderly cleaning woman speaks out at the altar, and the millionaire calls off the wedding right then and there. Margaret Johnson never imagined that one day she would be the center of attention at a $1 million wedding. For over 20 years working as a cleaner for the Wilson family, she had always been a silent shadow in the luxurious rooms of the mansion in Beverly Hills, New York City. At the exact moment, the priest asked if anyone had any objection to the union between Michael Wilson and Jennifer Parker. Margaret stood up trembling. Her yellow rubber gloves contrasted with the elegant surroundings as she slowly walked down the central aisle of the hall. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the tense silence that had fallen among the 300 guests. "I have something to say," declared Margaret, her voice steady despite the nervousness consuming her. Michael, in his impeccable black suit and bow tie, looked at her in surprise. His brown eyes, always kind when he spoke to her, now showed confusion. Jennifer, radiant in her Chantilly lace dress, instantly turned pale. The delicate veil fluttered when she turned her head sharply to face the employee. "Margaret, what are you doing?" whispered Michael, trying to maintain his composure under the curious gazes of the guests. The cleaning woman took a deep breath. Her hands, calloused from decades of hard work, firmly held a yellowed envelope. For weeks, she had debated with herself whether or not she should interfere at that sacred moment. But the truth weighed on her heart like a stone. "Mr. Michael, I have known this woman for much longer than you think," said Margaret, discreetly pointing at Jennifer. "And there are things you need to know before you say yes." A murmur spread among the guests like wildfire. Mrs. Elizabeth, Michael's mother and matriarch of the Wilson family, stood up indignantly from her seat in the front row. Her jewels sparkled under the chandelier lights as she gestured angrily. "How dare you interrupt my son's wedding?" shouted Elizabeth, her voice echoing off the walls covered in white flowers. "Security, remove this woman immediately!" But Michael raised his hand, stopping the men in suits from approaching. Something in Margaret's look intrigued him. All these years, she had always been discreet, respectful, almost invisible. For her to break protocol like that, there must have been a very serious reason. "Let her speak," said Michael, ignoring his mother's murderous glare. "Margaret has worked in our home for 2 decades. If she has something to say, I will listen." Jennifer, who had remained silent until then, finally found her voice. Her lips, carefully painted scarlet red, twisted into an expression of contempt. "Michael, darling, you're not going to listen to the delusions of a jealous employee, are you?" said Jennifer, forcing a sweet smile. "Everyone knows that long-term staff sometimes develop mental problems. Perhaps it's time to retire her." Jennifer's words cut Margaret like sharp blades. For years, she had swallowed humiliations, nasty comments, and looks of disdain. But that insinuation about her mental sanity was the last straw. "Mental problems?" repeated Margaret, her voice gaining strength. "Mrs. Jennifer, my mind is perfectly fine, and so is my memory, especially when it comes to you and your family." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Michael looked from Margaret to Jennifer, trying to understand what was happening. He had known his fiancée for 2 years, a period during which she had won not only his heart, but also his complete trust. "What are you talking about, Margaret?" asked Michael, his voice low but audible throughout the hall. Margaret opened the envelope with trembling hands and pulled out some old photographs and a folded document. Her eyes, blurred by the tears that were forming, scanned the images she had treasured for so many years. 15 years ago, I worked for a wealthy family here in New York City," began Margaret, her voice filled with emotion. "The Parker family. I took care of a beautiful, intelligent girl, just 12 years old. Her name was Jennifer." The world seemed to stop. Jennifer widened her eyes, and for the first time since Margaret started speaking, she showed real terror. Michael observed his fiancée's reaction and felt a chill in his stomach. "This is ridiculous," stammered Jennifer, but her voice came out weak and unconvincing. "I've never seen this woman in my life." "Lies," Margaret replied firmly. "Not only did you see me, but we talked many times. I taught you how to make fudge in your adoptive parents' kitchen. You told me your secrets, your fears, your dreams." The word adoptive dropped like a bomb on those present. Jennifer had told Michael that her parents had passed away in an accident when she was young, but she never mentioned adoption. Michael turned to her, seeking explanations in her eyes, but found only panic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer, called Michael, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and growing suspicion. Were you adopted? Jennifer took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. She knew she needed to act quickly to control the situation before it slipped completely from her hands. Michael, darling, yes, I was adopted, she admitted, forcing tears into her eyes. But I didn't want you to know. I was afraid it would change something between us. You come from such a traditional family. Elizabeth, who until then had been watching the scene with growing irritation, stepped forward. So what if she was adopted? That doesn't change anything, exclaimed the matriarch. Margaret, you're being ridiculous. Let's continue with the ceremony. But Margaret shook her head slowly. She knew she had come too far to turn back now. The truth needed to be revealed, regardless of the consequences for her life. It's not just about the adoption, Mrs. Elizabeth, said Margaret, looking directly into the eyes of the most powerful woman in the family. It's about what happened after Jennifer turned 15. The housekeeper turned to Michael, who was now visibly tense. His hands, once relaxed at his sides, were now clenched into fists. Mr. Michael, the Jennifer you know doesn't exist, said Margaret, her voice gaining a confidence she didn't feel. The sweet, innocent girl I knew turned into someone very different when her adoptive parents started giving her too much freedom. Stop it, shouted Jennifer, completely losing her composure. You have no right to come here and make up lies about me. Lies? Margaret laughed bitterly. Then explain this to me. She held up one of the photographs, showing it to Michael. The image showed a blonde teenager, clearly Jennifer, hugging an older young man, both in party attire. This photo was taken at her 15th birthday party, explained Margaret. But the young man in the photo wasn't just any guest. It was Brandon Miller, a 25-year-old man her adoptive parents hired as a private tutor. Michael took the photograph with trembling hands. It really was Jennifer, no doubt. But she looked different, younger, with an expression he had never seen on her face. So what? Managed Jennifer, but her voice was clearly nervous. He was just my teacher. That was a long time ago. The teacher you secretly dated for an entire year, continued Margaret relentlessly, until your parents discovered he was taking advantage of you, a minor. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael felt as if the ground were moving beneath his feet. He looked at Jennifer, hoping she would vehemently deny the accusations, that she would explain everything in a way that made sense. Michael, please, begged Jennifer, tears now streaming freely down her face. That was a long time ago. I was just a confused teenager. That has nothing to do with who I am today. But it does, insisted Margaret, pulling another document from the envelope. Because you haven't told him about the consequences of that relationship, have you? Michael's heart began to beat faster. He sensed he was about to discover something that would change his life forever. What consequences? He asked, his voice coming out more like a whisper. Margaret looked directly into Jennifer's eyes before answering. She saw fear, anger, and a silent plea for her to stop. But some truths were too big to be buried. Jennifer got pregnant at 16, said Margaret, letting the bomb drop. And she had a baby that she gave up for adoption without anyone knowing. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. The guests turned to each other, trying to process the information. Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Is this true? He asked Jennifer, his voice laden with pain. Jennifer closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for one last attempt to salvage the situation. Michael, I can explain, she began. Yes, it's true, but I was very young, scared. My adoptive parents forced me to give the child up. I had no choice. And why did you never tell me? Asked Michael, his voice breaking with emotion. We've spent 2 years together, planned our future, talked about having children. Because I was afraid, cried Jennifer. Afraid that you would judge me, that you wouldn't want to marry me anymore. I love you, Michael, more than anything in my life. For a moment, the hall fell silent as Michael processed everything he had heard. Margaret watched the scene with a heavy heart. She didn't want to cause Michael pain, but she knew there was more he needed to know. "Mr. Michael," she said softly, "there is still more." Michael looked at her with eyes already red with contained emotion. "More what, Margaret?" "The child Jennifer had, she wasn't given to an unknown family," continued Margaret, taking the last document from the envelope. "She was given to a family I knew very well. A family that had always wanted children but couldn't have them." She paused, looking around the hall full of expectant faces. "The child was given to my sister, Susan, and her husband, Robert," revealed Margaret. "They raised the girl as if she were their own daughter. Her name is Emily, and today she is 14 years old." Michael's world completely collapsed. Not only had Jennifer hidden a child from him, but the child was being raised by the family of the employee who had worked in his home for 20 years. You know my daughter?" asked Jennifer, her voice coming out as a thread. "I know her and love her as if she were my own granddaughter," replied Margaret, her own tears beginning to fall. "And it's for her that I am here today." Elizabeth, who had remained silent since the last revelations, finally found her voice. "This is absurd," she shouted. "Even if all this is true, it doesn't change the fact that Michael loves Jennifer and wants to marry her." "Mother, please," said Michael, raising his hand to silence her. He turned to Margaret. "Why are you telling me this now? Why today?" Margaret took a deep breath. That was the hardest part of the whole story. "Because Emily is in danger, Mr. Michael," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "And Jennifer knows this but chose to ignore it." "What kind of danger?" asked Michael, now completely alert. "My sister Susan passed away 6 months ago, a victim of heart disease," explained Margaret, fighting back tears. "Robert, not knowing how to care for a teenager alone, started drinking. A lot. The house became a living hell for Emily." Michael looked at Jennifer, seeking some explanation. She was pale, her hands visibly trembling. "Jennifer," he called, "did you know about this?" I found out a few weeks ago," she admitted quietly. "Margaret came to me and told me about the situation." "And what did you do?" pressed Michael. Jennifer's silence was eloquent. Margaret stepped forward to answer. "She sent money," said Margaret bitterly. $5,000 and a message telling us to handle the problem without involving her. She said she couldn't get involved before the wedding. The hall erupted again in indignant murmurs. Even the most conservative guests were shocked by the coldness of Jennifer's attitude. Michael felt as if he was seeing his fiancée for the first time. The woman he thought he knew, whom he loved and with whom he planned to build a family, seemed to have turned into a stranger before his eyes. "Is this true, Jennifer?" he asked, his voice now filled with disappointment. "You sent money for them to handle the problem?" "Michael, you don't understand," Jennifer tried to defend herself. "I couldn't get involved. Our life was just beginning. If people found out about Emily..." "If people found out you have a daughter," interrupted Michael, his voice rising. "A daughter who is suffering while you worry about appearances." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. "It's not about appearances," shouted Jennifer, completely losing control. "It's about our life, about our future. I couldn't let the past destroy everything we built." "Our future?" repeated Michael, incredulous. "Jennifer, you built our relationship on lies. How did you expect me to react when I discovered the truth?" Margaret watched the argument with a heavy heart. She never wanted to be responsible for destroying a marriage, but she also couldn't remain silent while Emily suffered. "Mr. Michael," she said softly, "I tried to handle this in other ways. I approached Jennifer several times, begged her to at least visit Emily. The girl barely remembers her biological mother, but knows there's someone somewhere who is her blood." "And what did Jennifer say?" asked Michael, though he already suspected the answer. "That Emily had to understand that some things are impossible," replied Margaret. "That she had built a new life and couldn't go back." Michael turned to Jennifer, who was now crying profusely. Her wedding dress, which minutes earlier symbolized the beginning of a new life, now seemed like a cruel costume. "Jennifer, how could you?" he asked, his voice filled with disillusionment. "How could you abandon your own daughter for convenience?" "I didn't abandon her," protested Jennifer. "I gave her to a family that could take better care of her than I could. And when that family fell into crisis, you abandoned her again," accused Michael. "Sent money as if it were a problem that could be bought." Elizabeth, who had remained silent during the argument, finally spoke up. To everyone's surprise, her voice wasn't filled with anger, but with deep sadness. "Michael," she said slowly, "perhaps we should listen to the rest of what Margaret has to say before making any decision." All eyes turned again to the cleaning lady, who still held the envelope as if it were her lifeline. "There's more, Mrs. Elizabeth," confirmed Margaret, "and it's about the real reason I'm here today." She paused, looking around the hall filled with guests, fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. "Robert lost his job 2 weeks ago," continued Margaret. "He was drinking even at work. With no income and debts piling up, he made a desperate decision." "What decision?" asked Michael, though he feared the answer. "He wants to hand Emily over to an orphanage," revealed Margaret, her voice breaking. "Said he can no longer take care of her, that she deserves a better chance." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the waiters, discreetly moving through the hall, stopped to listen. "An orphanage," repeated Michael, horrified. "But she's 14 years old. The chances of being adopted at that age are almost zero." "Exactly," confirmed Margaret. "It's practically a sentence for her to grow up in the system, without family, without love, without a future. And all this while her biological mother lives a life of luxury and marries a millionaire." Michael slowly turned to Jennifer. His eyes, which once shone with love, were now hard as stone. "And did you know about this?" he asked. "Robert called me last night," admitted Jennifer quietly. "He said if I didn't come get Emily by next week, he would hand her over to the authorities." "And what do you intend to do?" asked Michael, though he already knew the answer. Jennifer closed her eyes as if the question were a physical blow. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just don't know." "You don't know?" exploded Michael. "Jennifer, we're talking about your daughter, a 14-year-old girl who could end up on the streets because you don't want to take responsibility." "It's not that simple," shouted Jennifer back. "You don't understand the complications. We have our life planned, our projects, our reputation." "Our reputation," repeated Michael, incredulous. "Jennifer, are you hearing what you're saying? You're putting our reputation above a child's life." Margaret watched the argument with a mixture of sadness and hope. She had revealed everything she knew, planted all the seeds of truth. Now it was up to Michael to make the right decision. "Mr. Michael," she said softly, "may I show you something?" Michael nodded, still trying to process everything he had heard. Margaret took from the envelope one last photograph, this one more recent. "This is Emily today," she said, handing the photo to Michael. The image showed a teenage girl with brown hair and large eyes sitting on a park bench. She wore simple but clean clothes, and her smile, though forced, had a sweetness that touched Michael's heart immediately. "She looks like you," he said to Jennifer, who refused to look at the photograph. "She has Jennifer's eyes, but her heart is pure as gold," said Margaret affectionately. "Even after all she's been through, she still believes that one day her mother will show up to take her home." Michael felt a tear run down his face. He imagined what it would be like if it were his daughter, waiting for a mother who would never come. "Jennifer," he said, his voice now more controlled, "look at me." She raised her eyes reluctantly, meeting Michael's gaze. "Do you love this girl?" he asked. I don't know," answered Jennifer honestly. "It's been so long. She was just a baby when I gave her up. I don't even know who she is anymore." "Then find out," said Michael firmly. "Go meet your daughter, see who she has become, and then tell me if you can abandon her again." Jennifer shook her head desperately. "I can't, Michael. And if she hates me, and if she wants to come live with us, and if this changes everything between us?" "And what if it does?" asked Michael. "Jennifer, if you're not capable of loving your own daughter, how can I be sure you can love our future children?" The question struck Jennifer like lightning. She had never thought about it that way. "This is different," she tried to argue. "Our children will be planned, wanted, Like Emily should have been, Michael completed. Jennifer, are you listening to yourself? Are you dividing maternal love into categories? Margaret, who had remained silent during the argument, finally spoke up again. Mr. Michael, may I tell you how Emily talks about her mother? She asked. Michael nodded, while Jennifer tried to step away, clearly not wanting to hear. Every time I visit her, she asks if I have news from her mother, said Margaret, her voice filled with emotion. She keeps a small photo that Robert kept from the day Jennifer gave her away. A blurry photo. You can barely see the face, but she treats it like a treasure. Michael felt his heart tighten even more. And what do you tell her? He asked. I say that her mother must be thinking of her every day, replied Margaret, giving Jennifer a meaningful look. But lately it's been hard to keep that hope alive. Michael turned to the guests, who were watching the entire scene in absolute silence. Then he looked at his mother, who was now visibly moved. Mother, he said, what would you do in my place? Elizabeth took a deep breath before answering. Son, 20 years ago, I would have told you to ignore all this and go ahead with the wedding, she admitted. But today, looking at Margaret, seeing the courage she had to come here and speak the truth, I understand that there are things more important than social appearances. She paused, looking directly at Jennifer. A woman who is capable of abandoning her own daughter for convenience is not worthy of being my daughter-in-law, said Elizabeth firmly. The room erupted in murmurs again. Elizabeth Wilson, known for her coldness and focus on social status, had just supported a cleaning lady against her son's bride. Jennifer looked around desperately, seeking support among the guests, but she found only looks of judgment and disappointment. Michael, please, she begged one last time, don't let this destroy what we have. We can handle Emily's situation after the wedding. We can help her financially, find a good family for her. Stop, Michael interrupted, raising his hand. Just stop. You still don't understand, Jennifer. Emily is not a problem to be solved. She is your daughter, your blood, your responsibility. He paused, looking at the woman he had loved so much and who now seemed like a stranger to him. And if you can't understand that, then we truly don't know each other, Michael continued, because I cannot marry someone who has no love in their heart for an innocent child. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jennifer recoiled as if she had been slapped. Her legs trembled and she had to lean on the altar to keep from falling. You're breaking up with me? She asked, incredulous. You're canceling our wedding because of a child you don't even know? I'm canceling our wedding because I've discovered that the woman I thought I loved doesn't exist, Michael replied sadly. The Jennifer I knew was kind, caring, capable of unconditional love. The woman before me is cold, calculating, and capable of abandoning her own daughter. He turned to the priest, who had watched the entire scene in respectful silence. Father Thomas, I'm very sorry, but this wedding cannot continue, Michael announced for the entire hall to hear. The priest nodded, understanding he had witnessed something far beyond a simple religious ceremony. I understand, my son, he said softly. Sometimes God shows us the truth in ways we don't expect. Michael turned to Margaret, who was still standing in the middle of the aisle, trembling with nervousness and emotion. Margaret, he said, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to come here and tell me the truth. I know it wasn't easy. Mr. Michael, I only want what's best for Emily, replied Margaret, wiping tears from her eyes. She deserves a chance to be happy. And she will have it, promised Michael. Let's go there right now. I want to meet this girl. Jennifer, who had remained in a state of shock, finally reacted. Michael, you can't do this, she protested. You can't just show up in her life and turn everything upside down. I won't turn anything upside down, replied Michael calmly. I'm going to offer her what she should have had from the beginning. A family that loves her. He turned to Elizabeth, who was watching everything with an expression that mixed pride and sadness. Mother, are you coming with me? He asked. Elizabeth approached her son and hugged him tightly. Of course I am, she said. And Margaret, you too. After all, you're practically that girl's grandmother. Margaret smiled for the first time since she had entered the hall. For so many years she had been treated like an invisible employee, and now she was being invited to be part of a family. "It would be an honor," she replied. Michael began walking toward the exit, followed by Elizabeth and Margaret. The guests parted to let them pass, many with tears in their eyes after witnessing such a powerful display of love and courage. "Michael," shouted Jennifer behind him, "you'll regret this. You don't know what you're getting into." Michael stopped and turned one last time to look at her. "Jennifer, for the first time in years, I'm absolutely certain of what I'm doing," he said. "I'm choosing true love over convenience. I'm choosing truth over lies, and I'm choosing to protect an innocent child instead of protecting appearances." He paused, his eyes scanning the face of the woman he had loved. "If that makes me wrong, then I'd rather be wrong than live a lie for the rest of my life," he concluded. With those words, Michael left the hall, leaving behind not just a bride and a wedding, but an entire life built on false premises. The drive to Robert's house took an hour and a half. During the entire trip, Margaret told Michael and Elizabeth all about Emily. Her excellent grades in school, her love for books, her drawing ability, and most of all, her gentle and resilient nature. "She never complained about anything," said Margaret as she looked out the window of Michael's car. "Even when Robert started drinking, even when food became scarce, she always found a way to be thankful for what she had." "How is she handling the possibility of going to an orphanage?" asked Elizabeth. "She doesn't know," admitted Margaret. "Robert hasn't had the courage to tell her yet, but I know she senses something is wrong. Yesterday she asked me if I could take her to live with me, but my apartment is too small and I don't have the financial means." "That won't be a problem anymore," Michael interrupted firmly. "Emily will have everything she needs." When they arrived at the address, Michael was shocked by the condition of the house. It was a small two-story home in a working-class neighborhood with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Several windows had broken panes, patched with tape. "She lives here?" asked Elizabeth, visibly moved. "Ever since Susan passed, Robert has let everything fall apart," explained Margaret sadly. "He can barely take care of himself, let alone the house." Michael took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Several minutes passed before a male voice, clearly slurred by alcohol, shouted from inside. "Who is it?" "It's me, Robert, Margaret," replied the cleaning lady. "I have some people with me who would like to meet Emily." The door opened slowly, revealing a man of about 50, unshaven and wearing dirty clothes. His red, swollen eyes made his condition clear. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" "And who are these people?" asked Robert, trying to steady himself. "Robert, this is Michael Wilson and his mother, Elizabeth," Margaret introduced. "They would like to speak with you about Emily." Robert's eyes widened upon hearing the surname Wilson. Even in his state, he recognized the name of one of the wealthiest families in New York City. "Wilson, as in Wilson Corporation?" he asked, trying to pull himself together. "That's right," confirmed Michael. "May we come in? There are some important matters we need to discuss." Robert hesitated for a moment, glancing at the state of the house, but finally stepped aside to let them enter. The interior was even worse than the exterior. Empty bottles were scattered around the living room, dirty clothes were piled on the furniture, and a strong smell of mold and alcohol hung in the air. "Emily!" shouted Robert. "Come down here, we have visitors!" Light footsteps descended the creaky wooden stairs. When Emily appeared, Michael felt as if he'd been punched in the chest. The girl looked exactly like her photograph, but even more fragile in person. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she wore a faded t-shirt and patched jeans. But it was her eyes that struck Michael the most. Large, expressive, and full of cautious hope. "Hi, Aunt Margaret," said Emily, running to hug the cleaning lady. "I didn't know you were coming today." "Hello, dear," replied Margaret, returning the hug affectionately. "I brought some people who wanted to meet you." Emily looked shyly at Michael and Elizabeth. She clearly wasn't used to visitors, especially ones so well dressed. "Emily, this is Mr. Michael and Mrs. Elizabeth," Margaret introduced. "They are friends of mine." Michael crouched down to the girl's level and smiled gently. "Hello, Emily. It's a pleasure to meet you," he said. "Margaret has told me many wonderful things about you." "She has?" asked Emily, her eyes lighting up. What kinds of things? That you're very smart, that you love to read, and that you draw very well, replied Michael. Is that true? Emily blushed and nodded timidly. A little, she said modestly. Would you like to see some of my drawings? Michael glanced at Robert, who was watching the interaction with a confused expression. I would love to, said Michael. But first, could we talk for a bit? All of us? Robert gestured toward the messy sofa. Sorry for the mess, he murmured. I wasn't expecting company. Elizabeth, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Robert, Margaret has told us about your situation, she said diplomatically. We know it's been difficult since you lost Susan. Robert hung his head, clearly ashamed. Susan was the one who took care of everything, he admitted. She knew how to handle Emily, how to keep the house running. I never learned those things. And now you're considering making changes to Emily's situation? Asked Michael carefully. Robert looked at the girl, who was sitting next to Margaret, clearly not understanding what the adults were discussing. I have no choice, he said, his voice breaking. I lost my job, the bills are piling up, and I'm not being the father she deserves. Uncle Robert, said Emily softly. Are you okay? You look sad. Robert closed his eyes, trying to hold back tears. I'm fine, sweetheart, he lied, just a little tired. Michael exchanged looks with Elizabeth and Margaret. It was clear Robert loved Emily, but it was also evident he wasn't in a position to care for her properly. Robert, said Michael gently, what if there was an alternative? A way to ensure Emily has everything she needs without you having to give her up completely? Robert looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. What kind of alternative? Michael took a deep breath. He had made a decision on the way there, but now that he was facing Emily, he was absolutely certain it was the right thing to do. I would like to help, he said simply. I would like to ensure Emily has everything she needs: education, proper housing, medical care, and most importantly, a family that loves her. In exchange for what? Asked Robert, clearly suspicious. In exchange for nothing, replied Michael. Just for the chance to make a difference in a special girl's life. Emily looked from one adult to another, trying to understand the conversation. Aunt Margaret, she whispered. What are they talking about? Margaret looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. Sweetheart, said Margaret gently, Mr. Michael is offering to help you and Uncle Robert so you can have a better life. What do you mean, better? Asked Emily innocently. Michael turned to her, deciding to be honest. Emily, can I ask you a question? He said. She nodded. If you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? Emily thought for a moment, her large eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her years. I would like Uncle Robert to stop being sad, she said finally, and I would like to meet my real mother someday. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Michael felt his throat tighten at the girl's simple but profound words. What if I told you I could help with both things? He asked gently. Emily's eyes widened. You know my mother, she asked, her voice full of hope. Michael looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. Actually, yes, he admitted, and she's been thinking about you a lot lately. It wasn't exactly a lie, Michael told himself. Jennifer had been forced to think about Emily, even if she didn't want to. She has, asked Emily, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Does she want to see me? Michael knew he was treading on dangerous ground, but he also knew he needed to give the girl some hope. It's complicated, he said honestly, but I'm working on it. In the meantime, how would you feel about coming to live with me and my mother? At least until we sort everything out. Elizabeth stepped forward. We have a big house with lots of books and a beautiful garden, she said to Emily, and we would love to have you there. Emily looked at Robert, clearly torn between excitement and loyalty. But what about Uncle Robert? She asked. I can't leave him alone. Robert, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally found his voice. Emily, sweetheart, he said, moving closer to her. Maybe this is for the best. You deserve more than I can offer. No, protested Emily, rising from the sofa. Uncle Robert, you've taken care of me all these years. I won't abandon you. Michael watched the girl's loyalty with admiration and sadness. Even when offered a better life, she wasn't willing to abandon the man who raised her. "Emily," said Michael gently, "what if Uncle Robert could come visit us whenever he wanted? What if we helped him too?" "How?" she asked. "Well, he could get help to stop drinking, a new job, maybe even a new house," explained Michael. "But for that, he needs to accept the help." All eyes turned to Robert, who was clearly struggling with his own limitations. "I don't know if I can," he admitted honestly. "Drinking became my way of forgetting the pain of having lost Susan." "Uncle Robert," said Emily, approaching him and taking his hand. "Aunt Susan wouldn't want you to be like this. She would want you to be happy." The girl's simple words struck Robert like lightning. He began to cry, releasing years of accumulated pain and guilt. "You're right," he sobbed. "Susan would scold me if she saw me like this." Emily hugged him tightly, and Michael felt he was witnessing a genuine moment of healing. "Robert," he said after the man had calmed down, "how about this? Emily comes to live with us temporarily, while you get treatment and put your life in order. When you're ready, we can reassess the situation." "And if I'm never ready?" asked Robert fearfully. "Then we'll find a way for Emily to have the best of both worlds," promised Michael. "A stable home with resources to grow, but without losing her connection with you." Robert looked at Emily, who was still hugging him. "What do you think, sweetheart?" he asked. Emily pulled away and looked at all the adults around her. "Can I ask a question?" she said. "Of course," replied Michael. "If I go live with you, will I get to keep being who I am? Or will I have to become a different person?" The question surprised everyone present with its depth and maturity. "Emily," said Elizabeth, approaching the girl, "you're perfect just the way you are. We want to help you grow and develop, but never change your essence. And can I keep visiting Uncle Robert whenever I want?" "Whenever you want," promised Michael. "And can I keep being friends with Aunt Margaret?" "Aunt Margaret will be part of our family too," assured Elizabeth. Emily thought for a few more moments before slowly nodding. "Then I think we can try," she said. "But if I don't like it, can I come back?" "Of course you can," replied Michael, "but I'm sure you'll like it." 2 hours later, Emily was in the back seat of Michael's car, with a small suitcase containing all her belongings. Margaret had decided to come along to help with the transition, and Robert had promised to look for a treatment center the next day. During the drive, Emily asked countless questions about her new home, about the books she could read, about whether she would have her own room. Each question broke Michael's heart when he thought about how little the girl had had until then. "Mr. Michael," she said in a moment of silence, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," he replied. "Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me." Michael looked at her in the rearview mirror, seeing her big, curious eyes. "You know, Emily, sometimes life puts us in situations where we can choose to make a difference," he said. "Today I discovered there was a special girl who needed help, and I realized I had the chance to do something about it. But you cancelled your wedding because of this," she said, showing she had understood more of the situation than the adults had imagined. Michael was surprised by the girl's perceptiveness. "How do you know about that?" "You were wearing a tuxedo when you arrived, and Aunt Margaret was in a party dress," explained Emily logically. "And you both looked kind of sad, but determined. It wasn't hard to figure out." Michael laughed, impressed by the teenager's intelligence. "You're right," he admitted. "I cancelled my wedding today." "Because of me?" she asked, worried. "Not exactly," said Michael, choosing his words carefully. "I called it off because I discovered the person I was going to marry wasn't who I thought she was, and discovering that helped me realize what's truly important in life." "And what is important?" asked Emily. "True love, honesty, and taking care of the people who need us," Michael replied without hesitation. Emily fell silent for a few minutes, processing his answer. "Mr. Michael," she said finally, "do you think I'll ever get to meet my real mother?" Michael looked at Margaret, who was sitting beside Emily, and saw tears in the cleaner's eyes. "I hope so," he said honestly. But even if that doesn't happen, you will never be alone again, I promise you that. When they arrived at the Wilson mansion in Beverly Hills, Emily was awestruck. The house was larger than anything she had ever imagined, with manicured gardens, a swimming pool, and even its own library. "Is all of this yours?" she asked Michael as they walked to the main entrance. "It's ours now," he corrected. "Your home, too." In the days that followed, Emily adapted to her new life with an ease that surprised everyone. She explored every corner of the house with respectful curiosity, spent hours reading in the library, and quickly won the hearts of all the staff. Margaret, who had taken a leave from work to help with the transition, was impressed by how Elizabeth treated Emily. The matriarch, known for her coldness, completely melted in the girl's presence. "I've never seen Mrs. Elizabeth like this," Margaret commented to Michael as they watched Elizabeth teaching Emily how to play chess. "She always wanted a granddaughter," explained Michael, "but she never imagined she'd find one this way." A week after the move, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Jennifer. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, her voice sounding different, more humble. "I'm not sure there's anything to talk about, Jennifer," he replied coldly. "Please," she begged. I would like to meet Emily." Michael was silent for a moment, surprised by the request. "What changed?" he asked. "I haven't been able to sleep properly since the wedding," admitted Jennifer. "I keep thinking about her, wondering what she's like if she looks like me." "And what do you intend to do with this?" asked Michael, still suspicious. "I don't know," Jennifer answered honestly. "Maybe just see her, talk to her, try to understand if there's still any connection between us." Michael thought of Emily, who asked about her mother every day. "I'll talk to her," he said finally. "But the decision will be hers. If she doesn't want to see you, you'll have to accept that." "I understand," agreed Jennifer. "And Michael, thank you for taking care of her." When Michael told Emily about the phone call, she was silent for a long time. "She wants to see me," she finally asked. "She said she does," confirmed Michael. "But you're not obligated to do anything. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine." Emily looked out the window of her new bedroom, watching the gardens that were now part of her life. "I want to meet her," she said after a few minutes, "but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" asked Michael gently. "Scared that she won't like me," admitted Emily, "or that I won't like her. What if we're just two strangers who have nothing in common?" Michael sat on the bed beside her. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you are an amazing, smart and caring girl. Any mother would be proud to have a daughter like you. And if she can't see that, the loss is hers, not yours." Emily smiled timidly. "Will you be there when I meet her?" she asked. "If you want me to, yes," promised Michael. "I do," she said without hesitation. "And Aunt Margaret too?" "Of course," agreed Michael. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday in the garden of the mansion. Michael thought a family environment would be less intimidating for Emily than a neutral location. On the morning of the meeting, Emily was visibly nervous. She changed clothes 3 times and asked several times if her hair looked nice. "You look beautiful," Margaret assured her, fixing a stray strand of the girl's hair. "And remember, be yourself. That's all you need to be." When Jennifer arrived, Michael was surprised by her appearance. She was simpler than she usually was, wearing jeans and a casual blouse without her usual elaborate makeup. "Where is she?" asked Jennifer, clearly nervous too. "In the garden, with Margaret," replied Michael. "Jennifer, before you go out there, I need you to understand something." She looked at him questioningly. "Emily is a special girl, but also emotionally fragile," explained Michael. "She's been through a lot in the last few years. If you're not absolutely sure you want to be part of her life, it's better to leave now." "I understand," said Jennifer, swallowing hard, "and I want to try." Michael led her to the garden where Emily was sitting on a bench with Margaret by her side. When she saw Jennifer approaching, she stood up slowly. Mother and daughter looked at each other for a long moment, two strangers who shared blood but had no memories in common. "Hi," said Jennifer softly. "Hi," replied Emily, her voice almost a whisper. You're beautiful," said Jennifer, tears beginning to form in her eyes. You look like me when I was your age." Emily looked at her curiously. "Do you have pictures from when you were a child?" she asked. "I have a few," replied Jennifer. "I brought them to show you if you'd like." They sat on the bench, and Jennifer opened a small bag from which she took out a photo album. Michael watched from a distance as they flipped through the pages together, Jennifer explaining each photo and Emily asking shy questions. After an hour, Jennifer asked to speak with Michael in private. "How did it go?" he asked. "She's amazing," said Jennifer, crying. "Smart, polite, caring. Everything I wasn't to her." "And now?" asked Michael. "Now I want to be the mother she deserves," said Jennifer with determination. "I don't know how, I don't know if I'll succeed, but I want to try." "This will require much more than occasional visits," warned Michael. "Being a mother is a daily, unconditional commitment." "I know," replied Jennifer, "and I know it might already be too late to recover the lost years, but maybe it's not too late to build something new." During the months that followed, Jennifer visited Emily regularly. Initially, the meetings were formal and a bit uncomfortable, but gradually, mother and daughter began to develop a genuine relationship. Jennifer discovered that Emily loved art, just like she herself did when she was young. They started painting together on weekends, creating a tradition that became sacred to both. Michael watched the development of the relationship with satisfaction, but also with care. He wanted to be sure that Jennifer was truly committed before allowing Emily to get too attached. Robert, true to his promise, had joined a recovery program for alcoholics. The first few months were difficult, but gradually he began to get back on his feet. Michael helped him find a new job and even a small house to rent. One night, 6 months after the cancelled wedding, Michael was in the library when Emily appeared at the door, already in her pajamas. "Mr. Michael, can I talk to you?" she asked. "Of course, dear," he replied, closing the book he was reading. "What is it?" Emily sat in the armchair next to his, tucking her legs under her body. "I wanted to thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for what?" "For everything," she replied. "For giving me a family, for giving me a home, for helping me get to know my mother, for taking care of Uncle Robert, for changing my entire life." Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. "Emily, you don't have to thank me," he said. "You changed my life too." "How so?" "You taught me what really matters," explained Michael. "Before I met you, I was so focused on appearances, on doing what was expected of me, that I almost married someone who didn't truly love me. And now I know that family isn't about blood or marriage contracts," said Michael. "It's about love, commitment, and taking care of each other." Emily smiled, that smile that had won Michael's heart from the very first day. "Mr. Michael, can I ask you a personal question?" "Always," he replied. "Do you regret calling off your wedding?" Michael thought for a moment before answering. "Not for a second," he said with absolute certainty. "If I had married Jennifer, I never would have met you, and meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even if it means you might end up alone." Michael laughed gently. "Emily, I'm not alone. I have you, I have my mother, I have Margaret, I even have Robert. I have a real family built on love and choice, not on obligation." "And what if one day I want to go live with my mother?" she asked carefully. "Then I will miss you terribly, but I will support your decision," Michael answered honestly. "Because loving someone means wanting what's best for that person, even if it doesn't include you." Emily stood up and ran to hug him. "I never want to leave you," she whispered. "You're the best father I could have asked for." The word father struck Michael like a bolt of lightning. All these months, he had avoided defining his role in Emily's life, fearing he might be presumptuous. But hearing her call him father was the most moving moment of his life. 1 year after the cancelled wedding, Michael organized a special birthday party for Emily. She was turning 15, and he wanted it to be unforgettable. The party was held in the same hall where his wedding to Jennifer should have taken place. But this time, instead of wedding decorations, the place was adorned with all of Emily's favorite colors. Everyone was there. Elizabeth, who now insisted that Emily call her grandma. Margaret, who had officially become the housekeeper, but was treated like family. Robert, who had been sober for 8 months and worked as a gardener at a school, and even Jennifer, who brought as a gift a painting she had made especially for her daughter. During the party, Michael gave a speech that moved everyone present. "Exactly 1 year ago, I was in this very hall, thinking I was about to start a new life," he said, looking directly at Emily. "I had no idea I was right, but for reasons completely different from what I expected." He paused, looking at the smiling faces around him. "Emily, you didn't just change my life, you saved me from living a lie," Michael continued. "You taught me that family is something we build with love, not something we inherit or buy." Emily, beautiful in her blue dress chosen especially for the occasion, smiled with tears in her eyes. "And because of that," said Michael, taking an envelope from his pocket, "I would like to give you a special gift." He handed the envelope to Emily, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside was an official document. "They're adoption papers," explained Michael. "If you want, I would like to officially adopt you, so you never have to worry about being alone again." Emily looked at the document, then at Michael, then at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "We've talked about this," said Jennifer. "I completely agree. Michael is the father you deserve, and I would like to keep being your friend and visiting you whenever possible." "Does this mean I'll officially be a Wilson?" asked Emily, barely containing her emotion. "Emily Johnson Wilson," confirmed Michael. "If you want." Emily didn't respond with words. Instead, she ran to hug Michael, crying with happiness. "Yes," she shouted. 1,000 times yes." The hall erupted in applause and tears of joy. Elizabeth approached the two, wrapping them in a family embrace. "Welcome officially to the family, my dear," she whispered to Emily. Margaret, who was watching the scene from afar, came to join the group. Robert, visibly moved, also approached. "Emily," he said, "Susan would be so proud to see what a beautiful and happy young woman you've become." "Uncle Robert," replied Emily, not letting go of Michael, "you'll always be important to me. You taught me to be strong. And now Michael will teach you to fly," said Robert with a smile. Later that evening, after all the guests had left, the new Wilson family gathered in the living room. Emily was nestled between Michael and Elizabeth on the sofa, while Margaret served tea for everyone. "You know what I think is funny?" said Emily suddenly. "What?" asked Michael. "If you had married my birth mother, I probably never would have really known you," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe I would have just been the troubled daughter she hid away." "But things happened exactly as they were meant to," said Elizabeth wisely. "The universe has mysterious ways of putting the right people in our lives at the right time." "Aunt Margaret was very brave that day," added Emily. "If she hadn't spoken up, I might have ended up in an orphanage." Margaret, who was sitting in the armchair nearby, smiled modestly. "I just did what anyone who loves a child would do," she said. "I fought for you." "And now we're all a family," said Michael, squeezing Emily in his arms. "A strange family, maybe, but a real family." "The best family in the world," agreed Emily. In the years that followed, the life of the Wilson family continued to unfold in unexpected and wonderful ways. Emily excelled in school, discovered an exceptional talent for painting, and became a confident and caring young woman. Jennifer kept her promise to be present in her daughter's life, visiting her regularly and developing a genuine friendship with both Emily and Michael. She never tried to claim the role of primary mother, recognizing that Michael had earned that place through love and dedication. Robert continued his recovery and became a secondary but important father figure in Emily's life. He visited her every week, bringing flowers from the school garden where he worked and telling stories about Susan. Margaret, officially promoted from cleaner to housekeeper, but in practice treated as an honorary grandmother, continued to be the emotional heart of the home. Her courage on that fateful day at the altar saved not only Emily, but the entire family from a life built on lies. Elizabeth discovered the joy of being a grandmother and became Emily's fiercest defender, ensuring she had every opportunity to develop her talents. And Michael? Michael discovered that canceling that wedding was the best decision of his life. He found true love not in a romantic partner, but in a daughter he chose to love unconditionally. 3 years later, when Emily turned 18, she gave a speech at her graduation party that perfectly summarized her family's extraordinary journey. 3 years ago, I was a scared girl with no prospects and almost no hope, she said, beautiful in her graduation gown. Today I'm here ready to go to college, surrounded by people who love me and whom I unconditionally love. She looked directly at Michael, who was sitting in the front row with proud tears in his eyes. My father taught me that family isn't about perfection, it's about choice. Every day we choose to love, support, and care for each other. That daily choice is what makes a family real. She turned to Margaret, who was openly crying. My Aunt Margaret taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing even when you're scared. If she hadn't been brave that day, I wouldn't be here today. Then she looked at Elizabeth. My grandma taught me that it's never too late to open your heart to love. She proved that people can change and grow at any age. Finally, her eyes met Jennifer and Robert, sitting together in the third row. My birth mother taught me that it's possible to recognize our mistakes and work to correct them. And my Uncle Robert taught me that even when we fall, we can get up and start again. She paused, looking at all the people she loved gathered to celebrate her achievement. But the most important lesson I learned is that miracles happen every day. Sometimes they look like tragedies at first, like a wedding called off at the altar. But if we're open to seeing, we discover that those moments are just the universe rearranging the pieces to create something far more beautiful than we could ever have imagined. The hall erupted in applause, but Michael could barely hear it through the emotion overwhelming him. He looked around at his extraordinary family, a family built on courage, truth, and unconditional love, and knew that every tear, every difficult moment, every brave decision had been worth it. When Emily came down from the stage and ran to hug him, Michael whispered in her ear, "Thank you for making me a better father than I ever dreamed I could be." "Thank you for choosing me," she whispered back, "every day." And in that moment, surrounded by his chosen family, Michael knew he had found the true meaning of love. It wasn't about finding the perfect person to share a perfect life, but about choosing to unconditionally love the imperfect people who make life worth living. End of story. Dear listeners, what an incredible story we just experienced together. The true love of a family proved stronger than any social convention. And what did you think of Margaret's courage? Do you believe Michael made the right decision? Leave your honest opinions in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.